I've been watching a lot of people online, a lot of Celtics fans reacting to some of the moves they've been making, some of the players they've been bringing in, some of the players they've lost, and there are quite a few people that are upset with the moves they've made. They feel like this Celtics team is going to be worse off. We all know the big loss for them was Gordon Hayward. I feel like most people weren't expecting him to decline that option just because his tenure in Boston was really riddled with injuries, and although he played pretty well last season, he was still dealing with some injury concerns, and I mean, myself included, I wasn't expecting him to get as big a deal as he got from the Hornets. I'd like to talk about that more in another video, but yeah, a lot of people, a lot of Celtics fans, they were expecting him to accept that player option and come back next year. And I think that Celtics fans are probably upset because they're thinking that if Hayward was healthy last season and he never got injured and he never had to really shake off any rust in that Heat series, maybe the Celtics could have gone to the finals, and maybe they could have given the Lakers tougher competition in the finals. Who knows? But I understand why there would be some people that would have that belief that maybe he could have elevated them all the way to the finals. But as a Raptors fan, watching that Celtics-Raptors series, that Celtics team looked really, really good even without Gordon Hayward. I really thought that Marcus Smart just fit better with that team in that starting lineup. He was able to just really play a role for them. Part of the thing with Gordon Hayward on the Celtics these past 3 years, part of the problem was that he never seemed to really fit, and it's not entirely his fault. Like, when he was brought in there, he was supposed to just be a complimentary star, like a second, third option to first it was Isaiah Thomas, but then they traded for Kyrie, so he was supposed to be like the complimentary star for Kyrie. And then he got injured, and his first year back, he was just not the same. And then it wasn't really until this year that he started to show signs of his former all-star self. But then we saw a guy like Jason Tatum really develop, and he's becoming a superstar in this league. Jaylen Brown, I think he's going to be an all-star next year. He really developed his offensive game this year. And they also brought in Kemba, so I feel like Gordon Hayward really just got lost in the shuffle. And the thing is, the skills that Hayward has, there are already a lot of other guys on this team that can do things that he does. So, like I said, I think he just kind of got lost in the shuffle. He's a good player, but they didn't necessarily need him. That's kind of the point I'm trying to get at, right? And then in that Toronto series, we saw Marcus Smart. He just really fit in well. He's not a guy that like demands a lot of touches. He's not a guy that's like going to be most successful when he has the ball in his hands. He can hit timely threes. He's just a really, really good defender. Like, Hayward's a pretty good defender, but Marcus Smart is just on another level, right? Even though he's smaller, he's just so tough, and he can guard multiple positions. He really gives a ton of effort on that end. And watching that Raptors offense against the Celtics defense, the Celtics defense was like really, really suffocating. Even with a guy like Kemba Walker on the floor, who's not the best defender, that team was still really, really good on defense. And I think that if they have a starting lineup of Kemba, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Tatum, and now Tristan Thompson at the 5, who's going to be like a really big, I think underrated pickup for them next year, that team is going to be really, really tough to score on defensively. I feel like one of the only weaknesses the Celtics had on defense last year was that they weren't able to really, or not that they weren't able to finish defensive possessions, but they allowed teams to get a lot of second chance points just because they didn't have that, that reliable center that they could throw into lineups all the time. They did struggle on the glass, but now that they have Tristan Thompson, he's one of the best, not only offensive rebounders in the league, but he's a great defensive rebounder as well. And defensively, I think he's going to be good too. He's mobile. He can play in the pick and roll. He's not going to get exposed in the pick and roll on defense. And he's not going to demand tons of touches, right? He's just going to be a guy that's going to play his role, play hard defense, crash the glass. And that's what the Celtics really need. and they got him for pretty cheap. They got him for like less than 10 million a year. So that's going to be a really underrated signing for them. I think he's going to make a really big impact next year. Then they also signed Jeff Teague. He's going to be able to he'll probably play in that like sixth man role. You know, he's a solid guy. He's going to be a good backup point guard for them. I'm not looking at their roster right now, so I don't know who exactly they have coming off the bench, but I could see Romeo Langford getting some more minutes. I think that he has some defensive potential and shot creation ability, so I'd like to see him get some more minutes. Daniel Tice will probably be their backup center now. Robert Williams could probably also still get some more minutes. We'll have to see. Maybe they can sign some more like 3-and-D wings maybe to come off their bench, but you know, come playoff time, the rotations are going to get cut anyways, right? It's going to be like 7-8 man rotation, so that's what's most important at the end of the day. They're going to get their wins in the regular season, similar to like the Bucks. It's what's going to matter is the playoffs, right? But I like that they signed Thompson. I think he's going to fill a lot of holes for them. Like I said, rebounding, and he's going to be good on defense too. And really, it's just going to depend on how much Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can develop, whether those guys can really be like the two best players on a championship team. Personally, I think that they can. I mean, they got to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals this past year with Tatum and Brown as their... I mean, I would probably take Brown over Kemba at this point. But yeah, they got to the conference finals, Game 6, with Tatum and Brown as their two best players. So the East is pretty wide open, right? The East is pretty wide open. I like the moves that the Bucks made, but I don't think the Bucks are like some unstoppable force or anything, right? I think they can be beaten. They've shown that they can be beaten. So the Celtics, they should be feeling good about themselves. If Tatum can take that next step, if Jaylen Brown can take that next step, they're going to be really threatening, right? Because we look at a team like the Bucks, what's been the main problem with the Bucks? They haven't had like a guy that they can really put the ball in that guy's hands and say like, go get me a bucket, right? At least not in the playoffs. Giannis doesn't really have that ability right now just because of the limitations in his game with his shooting. Chris Middleton, like, I think the Bucks have tried to make him that guy, but he has struggled in the playoffs at times. I think Jrue Holiday will help there, but I mean, we'll have to see. And the Celtics, if Tatum and Brown can really like develop, like I said, and play well during the playoffs, that's an advantage that they might have over the Bucks if those two teams end up playing in the playoffs in the conference finals or maybe a second round matchup. That's an advantage that the Celtics could have over the Bucks if it's a close game and, you know, it's coming down to the last few possessions. The Celtics could have the advantage just because they have better shot creators. I mean, let's not forget about Kemba. I know he was dealing with some injuries last year during the playoffs. He wasn't like super consistent. It was like kind of from game to game you didn't know you were going to get. But this is a guy who can still really like score in a hurry, right? Like he's an extremely difficult guy to guard, and any night he can go for like 30. So the Celtics, they're going to be interesting. I don't know if I'd have them as my favorite out of the East. I think I'm still liking the Bucks, but now that the Raptors have lost both Gasol and Ibaka, and they don't appear to have a starting center at the moment right now, I think the Raptors are going to probably drop a little bit in the standings. They'll still be a playoff team, but I think they might be more of like a 4 or 5 seed if they aren't able to really if they're not able to sign a replacement center for Gasol and Ibaka. I could see them dropping and the Celtics elevating to that 2nd seed. So I'd probably put the Celtics as my 2nd best team in the East. And I think that it will probably be the Bucks and the Celtics in the conference finals. That's who I'd pick right now. I would pick the Bucks and Celtics over the Heat in a matchup. If one of those teams matches up with the Heat in the playoffs next year, I would pick those teams. And yeah, I'd have a Bucks-Celtics conference finals. I'd probably pick the Bucks to win. But like I said, You know, you never know if the games are close, and the games tend to be closer, then I might go with the Celtics. But if the Bucks can really like get out to early leads and they can win games that way, then the Bucks got a good chance. But I like the moves the Celtics made. I like the moves they made. I feel like Celtics fans should be really optimistic. And you never know, they could always make some more trades, maybe near the trade deadline, or maybe make some free agency acquisitions. There's always veterans that get waived every year. Maybe they could pick up another guy around the trade deadline just to kind of bolster their rotation a little bit more, make them a better all-around team. We'll see, but I like this team.